Chapter 11, The Story of Lamont Sleets. When Miss Washington gets all excited about a lesson, she gets real theatrical and starts speaking in this dramatic, booming voice like she would if she were on stage. That's exactly what she's doing right now. I'm feeling so inspired this afternoon. She walks to the middle of the room and her fists clenched next to her ears and then opens her hands and raises them over her head. You've all inspired me so. The bottom of her light green sundress flows as she spins around, and I want to hold on to this feeling for as long as I possibly can. Zoe and I are sitting on one of the large plaid floor pillows in the graphic novel corner. Zoe's hand is cupped over her mouth, but not enough to hide her grin, and my hand's around my eye so I can't see Zoe sitting on my left, because if I could see her, I'd lose it. I thought it was going to be weird seeing Zoe today. I hadn't seen her since her house last Wednesday, which is the longest we've gone without seeing each other all year, except for during Christmas when she visited her aunt in Cincinnati. But when she walked into ELA a few minutes ago with Mia and Caitlin and made like nothing's changed, even though everything's changed, it wasn't weird at all. How will I hold on to this feeling? Miss Washington crosses her hands over her chest and starts to pace, taking deliberate steps. For one thing, I'm going to use it to fuel our lessons and power our learning. She's looking down as she speaks. And these lessons and this learning will be rooted in what all of you brought to this classroom these last few weeks. The first time Miss Washington got all theatrical like this back in September, pretty much everyone busted out laughing. Zoe's sister Grace says that's what happens every year. It happened when she had Miss Washington, but you get used to it really quickly because you don't have much of a choice. Still, there are times, like now, when it's next to impossible not to smile, and the smiling is contagious, and then so is the cracking up. Your oral presentations will be our springboard toward discovery and greater understanding. She stops pacing and looks up. Each afternoon this week, we'll be focusing on a different individual, an individual that you believed was worthy of introduction to your classmates. Considering how often we all see Miss Washington get theatrical like this, it's pretty lame that we still have trouble controlling ourselves. Not only does Miss Washington direct the shows up at the high school, but she also stars in most of the productions at the Playhouse. 2 years ago, she was Belle in Beauty and the Beast, and last year she stole the show as Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors. From what Grace says, Miss Washington really wanted to be in Bye Bye Birdie, but she has an out-of-town wedding the opening weekend and would have missed half the performances. Together, we're going to deep dive. She uncrosses her hands and holds them out, palms up and fingers spread. Together, we're going to learn more about these individuals, and maybe that will inspire one or some of you to deep dive on your own and learn more about an individual who interests you. Now let us begin our journey. Miss Washington lowers her hands and reaches into her back pocket. She pulls out a baseball cap, a Los Angeles Dodgers baseball cap, puts it on, and faces me. Today, we deep dive and discover Glenn Burke. I can't breathe. It feels like a cinder block is pressing against my chest, and by the way, Zoe's looking at me. I know I'm turning white or red or that my face has absolutely no color. Zoe has this blank look on her face, this blank, helpless look, like she knows what's about to happen, and there's nothing she can do to stop it. There's nothing I can do to stop it either, but it has to stop. Ever since Silas shared his story, Miss Washington says, still looking at me, Glenn Burke has been on my mind. Why has he not gotten the credit for inventing the high five? Why has he not gotten credit for inventing the world's most famous handshake? She knows Miss Washington's figured it out. She can't say that she knows. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. Maybe Glenn Burke hasn't gotten credit, she says, because maybe Glenn Burke didn't invent it. I reach for Zoe's stainless steel water bottle and down at least half of it. Then I close my eyes and try to will the air back into my lungs. me to tell you a story. Miss Washington drags her stool to the back of the class and sits. She waits for everyone to face her. Permit me to tell you the story of one Lamont Sleets Sr. in the late 1960s, nearly a decade before Glenn Burke raised his hand and invented the high five. Lamont Sleets Sr. was a soldier serving valiantly in the Vietnam War. As a member of the 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry, a unit better known by their nickname, the Five. I know what Miss Washington's doing. She's creating drama, building tension, and preparing to expose the truth and the whole truth. She can't do this to me. She can't do this to me. She can't do this to me. A year after the Five returned from Vietnam, Miss Washington says, clasping her hands in her lap, a reunion was held at the home of Lamont Sleets Sr. When the soldiers marched through the front door, Lamont Sleets Sr. welcomed them with their signature greeting. Miss Washington looks back at me. She has to see me squeezing the water bottle with both hands. She has to see the beads of sweat on my forehead, the beads of sweat dripping down my temples onto my cheeks. She has to see me trembling. 5, Miss Washington stands. She raises her hand and spreads her fingers wide. As the band of brothers reunited, that's what they all shouted, with their hands held high. 5. She looks around. Now Lamont Sleets Sr. had a son, Lamont Sleets Jr. At the time, he was a mere toddler, and when the little lad witnessed this, he insisted on joining in. He jumped and slapped his tiny palm against each and every one of their man-sized hands. I know the Lamont Sleets story. I learned about it when I was researching Glenn Burke. High five, Miss Washington says in a child's voice. That's what the little lad yelled. She walks deliberately to the middle of the room and then turns to me again. High five. No, I say, surprising myself that I'm capable of forming a word. No, that's not. Miss Washington holds out her hand. Let me tell you about Lamont Sleets Jr. That little lad turned into quite an athlete. As a young man, he earned himself a scholarship to play collegiate basketball at the Racers of Murray State University. At his very first practice, he greeted his new teammates with high fives. She snaps her fingers. In an instant, the high five became the Racers' handshake, and when the players on the other team saw this handshake, they started doing it too. She sits back down on her stool. That's the true origin story of the high five. No, I shake my head. It's not. That's not true. Miss Washington looks around the room but doesn't say anything. Then she smiles. Silas is right, she says. It's not true. I don't understand, Nolan says. It sounds true to me. It's not, Miss Washington says. The origin story I just shared with you is pure fiction, a hoax. A hoax? Caitlin says. Why would someone do that? That's a great question, Miss Washington smiles again. Why would someone do that? Miss Washington looks back at me. She wants me to answer. She knows I know, but I can't answer and won't, because if I do, everyone, perhaps for attention, perhaps as a joke, Miss Washington says. She holds out her hand. Perhaps because they know they could get away with it. So they lied, Caitlin says. They stole someone's truth. It appears they did, Miss Washington says. They stole someone's truth. How can they get away with that? Connor asks. I have my theories, Miss Washington answers. Zoe rubs my arm, and when she does, it only makes me more anxious because I know everything I'm feeling right now, is for good reason. A droplet of sweat falls from my chin and lands on my wrist. Sadly, lies will often drown out the truth, Miss Washington says. Glenn Burke doesn't get the credit he deserves because a lie drowned out the truth, his truth. How could that happen? Connor asks. We live in a time where the difference between fact and fiction, the difference between truth and untruth, is more difficult to discern than ever. Far too many are far too quick to believe anything and everything they hear. Miss Washington clasps her hands in her lap again. We can no longer allow that to happen because it's dangerous, harmful, and unfair. It's up to you. It's up to us to seek out the truth, to spread the truth, and to fight for the truth. I'm staring at the splash of sweat on my wrist. I refuse to look up because I know Miss Washington's looking at me, and the last thing I want to do right now is make eye contact with her. Our truths matter, Miss Washington says. Just ask Glenn Burke.